Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sotah daf membav. Today's daf is sponsored by Helen Danzak in loving memory of her mother, Lucille Flagler. We think of you often, always with a smile. Okay, we're going to get started. First of all, reminding everybody the Siyum is on Wednesday. So hope to see you all there, the Zoom Siyum. And again, there's Siyums in different places around the world. In Israel, they're all listed on the website and on the Hebrew side, and the Israeli ones, you can find them. And the ones in America, if you're part of a WhatsApp group and your group is arranging one, or you can initiate arranging one and a get together for the Siyum, so you can follow there. Okay, we're going to get started. We have a very long daf. As I told you, all the dafim at the end of the Masechet are very long, so we're going to get started. The beginning of the daf is a little more tricky. The study guide is there with the whole first side of the page, which will help organize a little bit the structure. And I put a chart also to help kind of summarize the content. It will be a little confusing. The second side of the daf is much simpler, although yet long. So the Mishnah, just to remind you, we went through the ceremony. We were sort of toward the end now of the egla arufa ceremony after this kinyan, which was the previous Mishnah. The elders from the Sanhedrin come. Then we get the elders of the city. So the elders of the Sanhedrin come and they measure. We had a whole debate how many people have to come. They measure which city. Then we find the city. Then we find the elders of that city. And then we take them, and then they come, they break the back of the neck of the calf. And then they say, they wash their hands and they say, our blood didn't spill we didn't spill this blood, our hands didn't spill this blood. And then according to the Torah, if you recall, we looked at the psukim, the kohanim, first they say this kinim come, and then the kohanim, and it never says what role the kohanim play. So what the Mishnah does is, or the oral tradition did, which the Mishnah kind of quotes, which is that the statement that the elders are supposed to say is actually split in half. And the first part that we saw in the end of yesterday's daf is what the elders say. And the next line, which really sounds just like a continuation, must be what the kohanim say. So that's where we're going to start our daf. Right at the top, HaKohanim omrim, kaper la'amcha Yisrael asher padita Hashem. Redeem, atone for your people. Now you understand why they said the kohanim said this, because the kohanim are the ones responsible for atonement in general. And don't let innocent blood be spilled. And then the end of that pasuk is v'nichapar lahem adam, and the blood will be atoned for them. So then they point out in this Mishnah, lo yitzrichim lomar v'nichapar lahem adam. That's not part of the quote. Remember, there's the section they're supposed to say, and that's how we got into this whole thing, because that section has to be said in Hebrew, and it was in the slew of ceremonies that either could be recited in any language or specifically in Hebrew. But that part is not part of the quote. Okay, don't be confused, even though it appears at the end of that verse. It's the Ruach HaKodesh, right? However we understand this, like it's a voice of a holy voice kind of saying, Holy Spirit, saying that it's more of the way I would say it is, it's more a description of what's the end result. After you finish the ceremony, at this point, the blood is atoned for them, basically. They've resolved this issue of this person killed that nobody knows who did it. After the ceremony, we're good. We're clean. Now we're going to start with the Gemara. And here comes it's a bit confusing. I'll start off with, and they're on the sheet if you want to follow on the sheet. There's two psukim that are important to see here. We're going to compare, excuse me, egla, arufa, and para aduma, the red heifer. Okay, so in our ceremony, it says, and it's the second pasuk I brought on the sheet, but I'll read it first, Varim, chapter 21, verse 3. Okay, so the closest city, lakuz keneh here, egla pakar, so they take a calf. Now it describes the animal. And now we're going to have a whole description about what types of animal can be used, what are the criteria for this. For para aduma, we're going to eventually also compare to sacrifices. Asher lo ubaba, which wasn't worked, asher lo mashcha ba'ol, that they didn't put a yoke on it. A yoke is this kind of stick type thing or a long thing that they would put on the animal that they would be able to put a burden on top, or they'd be able to attach to something, or you can look in the Torah and they show one that sometimes it's called the tzemed, which is for two animals to kind of put them together so they could work together. So it was something they put on. So we have number one, lo ubaba, which means it wasn't worked. Number two, lo mashcha ba'ol, didn't have this yoke on it. So and it wasn't pulled by a yoke. So notice the words, number one, asher lo ubad ba. Ba is often a word we use that's limiting, only here. And lo mashcha ba'ol means it wasn't pulled by an oak. If you know, now go to the para aduma pasuk in chapter 19 of Bamidbar, pasuk bet, number 2, verse 2, it says, I'm skipping the beginning, bring a red heifer, tmima, pure, right, not blemished, or really they're now going to say, asher ein ba mum, which doesn't have a blemish. Notice again the word ba, which seems to be saying, again, ba always means exclusively here, not anywhere else. And then it says, asher lo ala aleha ol. Now, notice the words here. It says ol, but it says lo ala aleha, meaning it wasn't put upon it. It doesn't say anything about pulling. Right? It seems like just putting it on is an issue. Okay, whereas with the egla arufa, it sounded like it was pulling it. So now the Gemara is going to start off by suggesting, v'yehe mum posel be'egla mikav hachomer. Maybe a blemished animal is also a problem, even though it didn't say anything about a blemished animal in the egla arufa. Why we would learn it from a kal v'chomer. What's the kal v'chomer? Ma para she'ein hashanim poslot ba. We didn't point this out, but what's an egla? It's a calf. What's a calf? A young animal, which means that once it gets past its first year, can't be used. Now, para aduma has no age limitation. It could be any red heifer, whatever age it is. So you see here the para, it's got a lighter law because, right, easier, kal, as we say in the kal v'chomer. And yet, mum poselba, okay, and the mum will disqualify it. So egla, sheshanim poslotba, then the egla arufa, which is limited in age, what do you say, kal v'chomer, the mum, the blemish, will mess it up? To which they answer no. Here we get to what I talked to you about before. I tried to preface some of the, kind of raise the issues in the beginning so you see them when we get to them. Asher ein ba mum, ba is only here is the issue of a mum, an issue. Ba mum posel ve'ein mum posel ba'agalat. That comes to exclude egla arufa from the din of blemishing. So the fact that by para aduma it uses the word ba exclusively here, not anywhere else. Well, then you should learn from here. Lo yehu shav avodot poslotba. If you're going to say ba is limiting, then let's go to the egla arufa. By egla arufa, it says 2 things. It wasn't worked at all, and you didn't put a yoke on it. By para aduma, it says only you didn't put a yoke on it, right? Now, I'm not going to talk about the pulling and the putting on. We'll get to that much later, although we will mention it here, and it'll be a little tricky, but we'll deal with it later. If it says asher lo ubaba, that means it wasn't worked at all, any kind of work, but it says ba, which means this is only an issue for egla arufa. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, what did we learn? We're going to learn right now that we're going to learn from egla arufa to para aduma that also by para aduma, it's not just all, it's any work. The animal can't have been worked at all if you want to use it as a red heifer. So if ba is an exclusionary term by the mum, then ba should be exclusionary also by egla arufa. And asher lo ubaba, which comes to include all other kind of work being done for the animal, well, that should be exclusively for egla arufa, and it's not. And that's what we're going to see right now. So again, starting from the question, elameata, so from here, that ba is exclusionary, lo yehu shar vodo poslopa, then other work should not be forbidden for a para aduma animal. And alama amal Rav Yehuda Amarav, but why did Rav Yehuda say in the name of Rav? Hiniach aleha udashel sakin. If you leave a bundle of these sacks, which are even empty sacks, they're not even heavy, but you put them on the animal, even like, let's say I'm carrying a bag of like a bunch of sacks. I don't want to carry them anymore, these bags. They're heavy. I just stick them on the animal. Not that I want the animal to carry them. I just put them on the animal. Sula. That disqualifies an animal from being a para aduma. Now here's a side point. Ube egla ajitim shoch. When it comes to the egla arufa, it's only if the animal actually, you pull the animal and make the animal carry them. It's actually, this is a very confusing line, and we're going to get back to it much later. After we finish our whole sugya, they're going to do a gufa and say, let's try to understand this better. Because in the end, what we're going to see is we learn the law of all other work being forbidden to the para aduma from the egla arufa. But yet it's going to be more strict than the egla arufa, because the egla arufa has to be pulled, and the para aduma, just by putting it on, it already disqualifies. It's going to be a problem. What do you mean? If you learn one from the other, how could it possibly be worse in the other one? But that's a side point. Right now, I want you to stick to the main point here, what they're trying to say. I don't want you to get confused by it. We'll deal with it later. If you missed it, don't worry. What we're trying to say now is that they are going to learn from egla arufa to para aduma that all work is forbidden for a para aduma animal, and despite the fact that it says ba, asher lo uba ba, which should seem to mean just here, just like we just did with the mum, that the mum is just by the para aduma. So they say, how can we learn from one to the other if it says ba, which is supposed to be exclusionary? Shane para dialfinan ol me egla. Say, very simply, it says lo mashcha ol by the egla arufa, and it says lo asher lo alala ol by the para aduma. Gezeira shava, we're going to learn what's true for the egla arufa is true for the para aduma. Obvious problem of this, what? When you have gezeira shava, it goes in both directions. So if we're learning all avodot, and it's still, we're also ignoring the ba, which we haven't dealt with yet, but we're going to learn all kinds of work. It's forbidden for the egla arufa, and therefore it's also forbidden for the para aduma. We should also learn the egla nani, tete ol omi para. We should learn egla arufa laws from para aduma if we go with this gezeira shava. And therefore, mum should disqualify also. A blemish should make the egla arufa not be able to be used. And that's not the case. So they say no, because we're going in circular path here, because now we're back to where we started. Oh, well, it says mum aim ba. So we're going to say just there, not here. But be'egla nani ktiv ba. Now we're back to square one. But by the egla arufa, it also says asher lo ubad ba, which would mean exclusively here and not the egla arufa. So not the para aduma. So we basically have gone in circles. And again, we're back to square one, which is if we're going to say we don't learn mum to there because it says ba, then theoretically we shouldn't learn asher lo ubad ba, that any work is forbidden to para aduma from egla arufa, even though we have this gezeira shava. So in the end, we have a gezeira shava. We learn in one direction. We don't learn in the other direction because of the ba, but why do we learn in this direction if we have a ba also? So now we're finally going to get an answer. They're going to say, the ba by egla arufa is exclusionary, but it's not excluding para aduma. It's excluding kodshim, sacrifices. What's it telling us? If I bring an animal for a sacrifice, it doesn't matter if that animal had done work before. That doesn't bother us. It doesn't disqualify the animal for being brought as a korban. It disqualifies the animal for being a red heifer. It disqualifies the animal for egla arufa because it says so in the pasuk, but it doesn't disqualify if it sacrifices. So let's just make a good summary. The word mum aim ba is coming to tell us blemish is a problem for a red heifer, only for a red heifer, not for egla arufa. Gezeira shava of all, the same word appears in both, comes to teach us that since the egla arufa can't be worked at all, not just having a yoke upon it, also para aduma can't work at all, even not only just the yoke. Then what is the ba coming to say? Just this animal can't be worked? Oh, not sacrifices. Okay, that should be simple. And well, it won't be so simple because we're going to ask all sorts of other questions, but now they're going to explain why we need a pasuk to teach us ba and not by kodashim. Because you would have thought that you could make a kavachomer argument from the egla arufa. Why? Ma egla she'ein ba mum posel ba she'ein mum posel ba. Just like by the egla or egla arufa is a light law. Why is it light or kal, lenient? Because you can bring a blemished animal for an egla arufa, and yet avodah poselet ba. But yet, if it was worked in any way, it was used for plowing. Let's say you can't use it. So kodashim shemum poselet b'hem. Now sacrifices we know can't be brought with a blemish. Ein odin shavodah poselet b'hem. So it has a stricter law there. What do you think? Avodah would be poselet. That's why you need a pasuk to say here, the work disqualifies it, but not by sacrifice. To which question number one is ikal mifrach. You can knock out that kavachomer. Why? You could say mala egla shekain shanim poslot ba. What do you mean? Egla arufa has another chumrah in it. In other words, don't say it's lenient, and therefore we think that you would kodshim, that stricter would have the same issues, the same disqualification, things that would disqualify. No. When it comes to egla arufa, there's something strict that doesn't appear by sacrifices, which is it's limited in age. Now you might be thinking, what do you mean? Also sacrifices, some are limited in age. That's the Gemara's question. Atu kodashim, melika de pasla bushanim. Aren't there sacrifices also that are disqualified by age, right? There's all sorts of sacrifices has to be within the first year and the second year, all sorts of rules about that. So they say, you're right. You need this. In other words, again, the pasuk is coming to go against a kavachomer you might have made. The kavachomer would only work with animals who were limited in age, because then there isn't this stringency about the egla arufa that there is by sacrifice, because it's got the same stringency there. And then again, the egla has this leniency that a blemish is okay. And then you might have made this kavachomer, and that's what the ba comes to teach you. So we've now said it does have where to go. It would work, the kavachomer, and that's why you need the pasuk. So we dealt with question number 1. Now we have question number 2 and 3, which are the same type of question, which is, we're saying that ba comes to teach you that kodashim are not disqualified if the animal was used for work. But the Gemara is going to ask, we're going to ask 2 questions in this vein, which is the fact that kodashim can use animals that were already worked. We learn from a different pasuk. We don't learn it from ba. We learn it from the following pasuk. In the list of the blemishes, it says, I'm not going to go through what all these are. Too long a daf. Lo takrivu Elisha. It says, don't worship these, right? Don't use these as sacrifices to God. Why does it say these? These is an exclusionary term. You can't bring any of these blemished animals, but you can bring sacrifices that were used for work. Okay, there you have it. So you don't need ba in the egla arufa to exclude sacrifices when you have a pasuk already in the sacrifices context that excludes, says a blemish is a problem, but not something else. What's the not something else? If it was work. To which the Gemara says, I told you this is very confusing. It's a long-winded. That's why I organized it on the sheet somewhat. Also by what we learn from different psukim, and also in terms of the flow, so that if you get lost, you could try to follow there. We need it. Why do we need it? We need both psukim. We need the pasuk by the mum, the blemishes, and we need our pasuk, which is again the ba. Here the work disqualifies in the egla arufa, but not in sacrifices, because you would have thought there's 2 kinds of work you can work in animal. You can work permitted work, and that would be what we learned from 1, that if you worked something that was permitted, you can still use it as a sacrifice. The second one is coming to teach you, what if you work that animal in a forbidden way? What could that be? Let's say you work the animal on Shabbat. Okay, you're not allowed to work an animal on Shabbat. There's also shvita be'ema. Your animal's supposed to rest as well. We say that in psukim about Kiddush and B'Shamru B'nai Yisrael in Zachoret Yom HaShabbat L'Kadsho, right? Right, your animal. And so another thing, by the way, you can't work animals kilaim, 2 different breeds, make them pull a wagon together or pull a plowshare together. So avodat isur, you might have thought is forbidden, comes the second one to teach you that that's permitted also. Meaning, even if you use the animal for forbidden work, you could still use it as a sacrifice. And that's why you need both our pasuk of ba and the pasuk over there by the blemishes to teach both. But the Gemara is not satisfied with that answer, because hanami mehachanaka. There's another pasuk in the blemish section, which is 3 psukim later, which says, umiyad ben nichar, from a Gentile, lo takrivu alechem eloechem, mikol ele. Also, they can't bring blemished animals. Now, again, it uses the word ele, to which they say, ele, it says, these you can't sacrifice, but you could sacrifice animals that were used for work. So now we have 3 psukim. So it says avodat heter, permitted work. Even so, you can use a sacrifice. The second one is forbidden work. You can use as a sacrifice. Well, what do we need 3 for? No reason. You again don't need our pasuk then. The ba comes to exclude, right? Only in egla arufa, not in sacrifices. Itzrich, you do need it. Why? We're now going to say you need 3 psukim to teach the same halacha. Why? You might have thought, that's if, let's say, you work this animal on Shabbat before you sanctify the animal, before you designated it for a sacrifice. Then that's what so we have pasuk number 1, if you did any work that was permitted, you just plowed with the animal on a regular day. Second pasuk, if you plowed with the animal on Shabbat before you sanctified it. But you might have thought, once I'd say this animal is going to be used as a sacrifice, and then I use it for something forbidden, you might have thought that would disqualify it. Comes the third pasuk, possibly our pasuk, ba, only here does work disqualify, not even once the animal's sanctified for a korban, it's not disqualified. Shricha. And that's why you need 3 pasukim. Okay, so in the end, this whole question was really about the ba. If the ba by the mum of the para aduma is to say just here a mum and not an egla arufa, why isn't the ba in egla arufa just here and not para aduma? Because in fact, we do learn from egla arufa to para aduma, the para aduma includes all work is forbidden for the animal. It's all to come and teach you that sacrifices, it's the ba is excluding something else. Sacrifices, you can work the animal. You can even work it for isur. You can even work it for isur once you sanctify the animal. And then that's what that pasuk is for, and that's how we resolve it. Okay, that's the first part. Now we're going to go into the gufa. I told you we get back to this. You put this bundle of bags on it, it's disqualified. But by the egla arufa, unless you pull it, you're not liable. So now they're going to ask my question, but it's going to take us a little bit to get there. Question from a bright. Now we're going to learn this in 2 different ways. Until now, what did we say? We learned from egla arufa to para aduma that all avodot are forbidden. How did we learn it? From a gezeira shava. Here they're going to first learn from a kavachomer and then also bring a gezeira shava. So by para aduma it says a burden, right? The yoke sounds like only the yoke. Shara avodot minayin. How do we know that you can't work the animal at all? Amarta kavachomer logic, which is ma egla she'ein mum poselba and shara avodot poslopa. Again, going back to what we said before, the egla arufa is lenient because blemishes don't mess up the animal, and yet all kind of work you do on the animal is going to be forbidden. Parash and mum poselba enodin shara avodot poslimba. So a para aduma where a blemish, it's more strict. Wouldn't you assume it's strict about the avoda as well, that no work can be done on the animal? And if that's not a good enough argument for you, then we go back to what we said before, which is ne'amar kan ol v'ne'amar lalan ol. Same word appears in both. We have gezeira shava, as we say. We learn from one to the other. Ma lahalan shar avodot paslopa, af kan shar avodot paslopa. So just like all avodot are forbidden, any kind of work is forbidden for the egla arufa. Also, for the para aduma, all work is going to be forbidden. So now we finish the braita, and the first question they ask is not really what we want to get at, but they're just going to point out, ma im nafshechalomar. Why do they have to bring a second reason and say, if that's not good enough for you, what wouldn't be good about that kavachomer? Well, we actually brought this up before. You could knock it out by saying what? Mala egla sheken shani poslopa. Remember, by the egla, we have an age limitation, which doesn't exist by the red heifer. So there's a stringency that could knock out. If the lenient thing actually is strict, maybe you wouldn't learn a kavachomer. Inami, you could say though, you could say that's not the issue because there are sacrifices where there's an age limitation and yet you're not forbidden to do work to the animal. And there, but ne'amar kan ol v'ne'amar lalan ol. In case you bring up that issue though, we have the gezeira shava, mala halan shar avodot, afkan shar avodot. So in case you wanted to try to knock out the kavachomer, even though we have a response to it, still, here's a different response, which is you can learn gezeira shava. Here comes the question though. If the whole law about other avodot is learned out, and this is what I mentioned before that didn't make any sense, is learned out from the egla arufa to the para aduma, then mimakom shabata. It should be no different from the origin. The origin is egla arufa. Malahalan achitim shok. Since there it's unless you pull it, you're not going to be liable. Afkan achitim shok. Here also it should be achitim shok. So if you're learning it out from gezeira shava or from a kavachomer, from the egla arufa, then it should only be learned out the same level. It shouldn't be stricter. The para aduma ends up stricter. That just by putting it on, it's going to be a problem. So how do we explain this? They answer and they bring in a new thing that we didn't see before. Tinahi. It's actually machlokat tanaim how to learn it. Some people actually learn it from para aduma itself. And if you learn it from para aduma itself, then it can be stricter. If you learn it from egla arufa, then really you wouldn't say this, that just by putting it on, it would be forbidden. Okay, so now they're going to show. Some people learn it from the egla arufa, and then it would be the same as the egla arufa. It wouldn't be stricter. But the other people, the one who said, the Rav Yehuda and Marav, in this state, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav, this statement was said going by the other Tana who learned it actually from Para Aduma. Ditanya, and here's the brighter, we're going to see this machloket. Ol Eli Ala Ol. Shar Verot Minayin. Talmud Lomars, how do we know? Sorry, this is learning it. Actually, it doesn't show both. My mistake. This is showing specifically the other way of darshaning it. We already saw how to learn it from the egla arufa. Now we're going to learn it from the psukim themselves of the paraduma psukim. When it says Asher lo ala aleha ol by the red heifer, it says it's specifically about an ol. Shar Vadot Minayin. Where do we get the other ones? Talmud Lomar Asher lo ala aleha ol. The word Asher we've seen before. Saw it a few days ago, that asher is to include other things. Any way that it did, right, means any other method, not just an ol, but other things that went on the animal. So then why did it say ol? Why didn't it use a general term? Well, there's a stringency about an ol. Ol posel ben b'shad avodah, ben shelo b'shad avodah. The yoke is a problem. If you put the yoke on, even when it's not working, it's going to be a problem. Whereas shar avodot ain poslot ela b'shad avodah. The other types of work that you would do for this animal is only going to be a problem when you're working the animal, not when you're doing it at a time when you're not working the animal. So now the Gemara asks, ve'ema asher lo ala ol klal, ol prat, klalu prat, ain b'klal ala masha b'prat, ol imid yachrina lo. Now they suggest a different way of learning it. They say, what do you mean? Isn't this a klalu prat? Asher lo ala aleha is general, don't put anything on it. But then it says ol, which is specific. And when you have a general term, a general phrase, and then a specific phrase, what do we learn? It's only what the prat is. And as the detail is what's defining everything. So why don't you say ol, yes, not anything else? And that would go against what we've just said. To which they answer, asher ribuyahu. Again, we have the word asher, like we saw with asher bana, asher nata, where every time we said asher comes to include more things. Asher eras. So here also, we're going to say asher comes to include, and that's why even though you might have said the klalu prat doesn't apply here. We're going to see the same type of logic in another minute. We have exactly the same drasha by the egla arufa, the same style of drasha, and the same question and the same answer. Ol and liela ol. So there also, it says ol, maybe it's only the yoke. Shara Vadot Minayin. How do you know all other words? Well, this is more obvious in the pasuk Talmud Lomal asher lo ubaba, because it says it wasn't worked. So that's a more general term. Mikol makom, any kind of work. Im kemata malomar ol. So again, why does it specify ol? For the same reason. Ol posel ben b'shad avodah ben shelo b'shad avodah. The yoke is a problem, whether it's working or whether the animal is not working at all. Shara Vadot, any other work though, ain poslot ela b'shad avodah, is only going to be a problem if the animal's in its time where it's working. Again, they're going to question ve'ema asher lo ubaba klal, and ol is a prat. Maybe that first phrase is the general. Then you get to the specific, and what's the rule? Klal uprat, ein bechlal al masha b'prat. We only forbid what the details are when we have this kind of structure. Ol imid yachrini lo, which would mean only the yoke, nothing else. Asher ribuyahu. But then they say no, because of the word asher, that comes to include. Okay, so this was a way that we got, if you remember now, just to summarize, we have two ways of learning that all work is a problem for a red heifer. Either we learn it from egla arufa, gezeira shava, or kal v'chomer. So there's really three ways. That's two. Third way is to say we learn it from the psukim themselves of the asher being the ribuye to include more things any way you had work done. Okay, so those were two methods. And if you learn it from the egla arufa, then it's not going to be more strict and it's only going to be forbidden once you pull it. If you learn it from itself, then you could say, because it says asher lo ala ala ol, then just by putting it on, by putting some burden on the animal, even if you weren't planning to have the animal carry it, it would still be a problem. Okay, so that is a debate, Tanaitic debate. A little bit more about this till we move on. Last statement. When we say you have to pull it in the egla arufa, how long, how far do you have to pull it? So they answer, Amarle kimelo ol, the length of an ol. Okay, the length of what the yoke is, that's how long you have to pull it. They say, well, the yoke is long, but not so wide. So when we say the size of it, do we mean the length or the width? So it's the answer. They said, right, Rabbi Yochanan explained to me, or in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Meshichat ol l'rachbo tefach. It's the rachbo and it's a tefach. The width of a yoke is a tefach, and therefore, if I move the animal while it's carrying the burden, a tefach, which is nothing, a handbreadth, then already that's it. I can't use it for egla arufa. V'lema tefach. Why don't you just simply say tefach? Why do you have to say, this is very complicated, the size of the yoke, and then we had to figure out, is it the length or the width? Why don't you just say simply a tefach? It would have been much simpler. Right? We always kind of wonder why the Gemara doesn't do things simpler. So here they have an answer. Hakamash malan shiur de'ol tefach. They wanted to teach you something along the way, which is the size of the yoke is a tefach, the width of it. Well, lamai nafkamina, who cares what the size of a yoke is? Well, no, it's got relevance. If I sell you a yoke and we make a deal and we do a kinyan on it, maybe you give me the money, whatever it is, we do usually the kinyan is we pick something up, we make a sign, okay, but I didn't give you the yoke yet. And then I give you the yoke the next day and you say to me, this isn't big enough. And I say, well, we didn't talk about size. This is standard size. And guess what? If it's not a width of a tefach, you could say, this is not standard size. And I want to undo the deal, even though we already did a kinyan and we had an act of acquiring, right? This is not what I ordered, right? I always think of Amazon, right? You try to send back. This isn't what I ordered, right? At what point can you send it back? You have a 30-day grace period. There's no such thing in halacha. Once you do a kinyan, it's the end. But in this case, this would be what you could call a mekach ta'ud. It was a mistake. Now, moving on. That was the hard part of today's daf. Now it gets a little simpler. Why specifically do you have to do it by a stream? Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Yavo davar shelo asa perot. Bring an animal that didn't yet have children because it's under 1 year. V'ye'aref b'makom she'en asa perot. And you're going to break its neck in a place where nothing grows, because in the stream or next to the stream, nothing grows there. You don't grow crops right along the stream. And it will atone for this person who now will no longer have children. Okay, well, I should not say children yet. I should say who won't have fruits. What does it mean the person won't have fruits? We assume it means children. Well, the Gemara is going to question that. What do we mean? If we mean children, so what if it's a really old person who died? Or what if it's a person who can't have children at all? So what we're going to say, we don't do egla arufa because it's only someone who's having now a loss that they won't have children? Ela mitzvot. Okay, so they say, forget that. Peyrot is not children. Peyrot is mitzvot. They can't do anything productive, which is doing mitzvot, right? And that is why we do it by the nachal with an egla who can't have children in the place where they can't produce fruits. So the Mishnah had described what does it mean nachal eitan. It's not a place called nachal eitan, like you might have thought. No, it's a strong stream, right? Mashma'o kasher. That's how the Mishnah defined it. Now we're going to see two definitions. We're going to see where they get it from the psukim. Tanu Rabbanit, they quote a bright. Minayin leitan shu kasher. How do you know that eitan is kasher? And yes, you do it for a woman also. I see you're asking. I assume also for a child. I never saw anything that you wouldn't do it for a child. It's a person murder, but that's a good question. If it was a child, I don't know the answer. But yes, I would imagine for a woman as well. I can't imagine there's an exemption. Minayin leitan shu kasher. How do you know that eitan means strong? Shenemal, moving now to Amud Bet. Eitan moshavcha v'sim b'sela kanecha. Strong is where you sit and put b'sela kinecha. Put your nest in a sela. We see in this pasuk. First of all, eitan moshavcha means your moshav is strong, where you're sitting where your dwelling is strong, and it's compared to a rock, which is also something strong. Ve'omer, another pasuk, shim'u arim et riv Hashem. The mountain should hear the riv Hashem by eitanim osei aretz, and the eitanim, which are the founders of the world, okay, or the foundation of the world. So first of all, you see they're called the foundation of the world. That's something strong, obviously, and they're compared to mountains, which are obviously strong. Achirim omri, but here's a different translation brought up in the Braita. Minayin le'eitan shu yashan. By the way, I see, Adina, you're asking about the translation of kasher being a strong stream. There happen to be a number of different definitions. You can look, if you have a Gemara with commentaries, you can look. There's different commentaries exactly how to understand this word kasher and what it means. Minayin le'eitan shu yashan. How do you know that eitan means old? So this Braita brings up a different explanation. Old means it's been around for a long time. There's different explanations what this means even. Does it mean that the ground, the soil was there and it's not that they brought soil from somewhere else? Is it that there's different explanations exactly what this means, old, but something that's been around for a long time. Shneemal goy etanhu goy me olamhu. Here again, there's poetic. It compares the beginning to this first part of the pasuk to the second part, which is It's a strong name, right? But eitan doesn't here mean strong. It means me'olamhu. It's been around for a long time, this nation. Okay, so there you have two different definitions of eitan. Now you take a cleaver and you break the back of its neck. How do you know the back of its neck and not the front? My taima, gamar arifa michatata of. By the chatata of, the sin offering, a bird's sin offering, the way you slaughter birds in the temple is not through normal shechita. You do it where the kohen takes his finger, it's called melika, and basically slaughters it or kills it from the back of its neck. And there, by the chatata of, specifically by the sin off, the bird's sin offering, it says orfo. Okay, so it has the same root there, and since that's done at the back of the neck, also here is the back of the neck. Yes, it's true. I don't know why, Miriam. It's a very good question. I was wondering the same thing. I didn't have a chance to look it up. Oref always means the back of the neck, so it's a little bit strange why they would have to learn this from there. This came from the pasuk. Once you do the ceremony, you can't work the land and you can't plant the land. So now we're going to have a braita about this, and we're going to see there's actually a machloket. Is it talking about future or past? It has to be done just like the animal. You couldn't have worked the animal. Maybe the place where you do this ceremony can't be on land that was ever worked in the past. So Tanu Rabbanit, asher lo ye'aved bo v'lo yizareh. Now notice the words. Lo ye'aved means what was, it's actually a little tricky language, but lo ye'aved, it will not be worked, and lo yizareh, it won't be planted. Lo yizareh is very clear, it's future. Lo ye'aved is a little bit tricky. So Lisha'aval, divrei Rabbi Yoshia. Rabbi Yoshia says this all means on the past. You can't have planted there before, you can't have worked the land before. Rabbi Yonatan Amar Lahaba. Rabbi Yonatan says it's about the future. Once you do the ceremony, then that land can never be worked. And that's what the Mishnah had said. So Rava comes to explain this machloket Tanaim, and he says, nobody disagrees about the future. Obviously, that's future. Rabbi Yoshia also agrees you can't do anything in the future with this land, but kipligi l'shavar. But the question is it also a problem in the past? Rabbi Yoshia savar mikti velo. Now here's a debate. Does it say velo ye'abed? We're going to go with the Bach's girsa. The problem here is not the word ye'abed, it's the velo. It says asher lo ye'abed. If it wanted to say don't work the land, it would have just said velo ye'abed and don't work the land. Why does it say asher lo? Asher describes a state of being, that it wasn't worked. So he says it goes to describe the past. Rabbi Yonatan says, Miktiv asher lo ne'evad. If we want to talk about the past, instead of ye'abed, it would have said ne'evad, which is clearly past. Rabbi Yoshia says, asher l'sha'avar mashma. Rabbi Yonatan asher ribuyahu. So Rabbi Yoshia says, but it doesn't matter that it says ye'abed, which sounds like future. Still it says asher. Asher is describing a state of mind of where it is presently, which is based on its past. And Rabbi Yonatan says asher is just coming, like we've seen many times on Amud Aleph and the previous pages. Asher is just a word that's including more things, okay? And it comes to include other types of things, okay? Which we'll see soon. You can actually use it though. Two things you can use it for. You can comb your flax on top of that land, so we're not really using the land, and you can take out stones from it. So Tanu Rabbanan, now we're going to learn this from a braita. How do we write it's only planting? What about other avodot? Because it says avodah, right? This is general. This is going to be very similar to what we saw on Amud Aleph. Also, these type of drashot mikomako. So then why does it say v'lo yizareh? If all other avodot are already included, it has to be like planting, which is you're actually using the land, as opposed to the two we said in the Mishnah, they're not using the ground, and that's why it's okay. Now we're going to go same structure as before. Why don't you just say asher lo ya'bebo klal lo yizareh prat, right? Again, klal uprat. We have the general, can't work the land. We have the specific, can't plant. Klal uprat ein b'chlal mashu b'prat. Therefore, zri'ah in midyachrina lo would be just planting, not anything else. Asher ribuyahu. Here comes the asher l'ribuya to include all other avodot. Ziknei ha'ir rochatzim yidehem. Tanu Rabbanan. Choziknei ha'ir ahu akrovim al hachalal yirchatzu et yidehem al egla ha'arufa banach. Okay, so all this kenim, right? Wash their hands on the egla ha'arufa banach. That's a weird pasuk. They wash their hands on the egla arufa. She'en tamul amar ha'arufa. You don't need the word ha'arufa. What other egla is there? That's the calf we've been talking about. You don't need to define which calf. arufa. So why do you say that? They wash their hands specifically in the place where they broke the neck of the animal. And then they say, the Bright is continuing, and this we saw in the Mishnah already. Right? We didn't spill this blood, our eyes didn't see. What did you think? The court, the judges are the ones who did it? Bright says, like the Mishnah said, if you remember the words below mizonot and below levaya, without food and without escorting, were in parentheses in the Mishnah. It's very likely they weren't in the words of the Mishnah, but because of the words of the Braita, which say that, it got added into the Mishnah. Okay, but it really probably wasn't in the original of the Mishnah. But the point is, it means the same thing anyway. We didn't see him and not give him food. We didn't see him and not escort him. Now we're going to have a whole tangent taking us almost to the end of the daf, all about escorting and the importance of escorting. Tanya, Haya Rabbi Meir Omer, Kofim levaya, sheschar halevaya en shiur. It actually is till the end of the daf. Okay, so we force people to do this, meaning you can insist that people escort people. It's so important because the reward for this, there's no bounds. How do we know this? Shnema, we're going to quote the first chapter of Shoftim. There's a situation where the Shomrim saw ish yotzei min ha'ir. They say, we don't know where the entrance to the city is. Okay, we want to find it. Can you please help us? So, and we will do a chesed for you if you do that. Now, what is livaya? If we think of livaya, you need escorts, bodyguards. But in days without Google Maps, without Waze, without regular maps, okay, forget that, fancy Google Maps. They didn't have real maps. So, or maybe they did, but maybe not everybody had them. How do you know how to find places? The only way is someone has to show you the way. So this guy was their escort. He showed them the way. Now we're going to see, he didn't escort them to the way, but he showed them the way. We don't know how. We'll see some different opinions about it. So he shows them the mavoa ear, which they couldn't find themselves. And now we're going to see what chesed happened to. Well, they killed the entire inhabitants of that city. This was in the conquering of the land. And that guy got sent home, right? They sent him away. He didn't get killed. And then we're going to hear more about this person in the same chapter. We still call it luz to this day. Tanya, what do we know about luz? Okay, there's all these special things. That's where this chela comes from. Sancherev moved everybody from place to place. He didn't remove those inhabitants from their place. All the destructions that came upon people in the land, nothing happened to these people. That's the ein la shiur. There's no boundary to the chesed they got for doing this. But this is the most fascinating one. Malach hamavet can't commit, so people don't die. What? They've been alive for thousands of years or hundreds of years. And what happens? How do people die there? When they get to the time where, okay, they're done, what do? They go outside the walls of the city, and there they die. Okay. And now we have a kavachomer. He didn't even say anything in words to tell to them. He didn't describe to them in words how to get there. He didn't escort them physically by walking them. Yet he got rewarded by this for generations and generations. You escort someone with your feet, right? Walk them to where they're supposed to go, all the more so. So how did he show them? He moved his lips a little, and somehow with that he told them what, how, where, I don't know exactly how. And Rabbi Yochanan he showed it, he used his finger. Tani Kavatei Rabbi Yochanan is brighter to support that reading. So he said it was because of he pointed. Now we get to someone who doesn't have levaya, doesn't have an escort, and is scared. What should he do? Obvious answer in the Gemara. Learn Torah, that will protect you. Here we have a pasuk that they say is a reference to learning Torah. Notice the word livaya. They're your escort service. They're like a necklace around your neck. We're back to the reward you get for levaya. This is a very strange reward. When Avraham went there with Sarah to Mitzrayim, to Egypt, and then Paro apparently escorted him 4 steps. And they darshan from that, he walked 4 steps. He got rewarded that he got us to be his slaves for 400 years because of the 4 psiot. It's a little bit weird that he escorted us, and the reward is that we ended up being his slaves. Shneamar v'avadum b'yinur tamar b'me'ot shana. Amar Rav Yehuda Amarav, Kol ha'melavet chavero arba amot ba'ir eino nizok. If you escort your friend 4 amot in the city, you will get rewarded that you won't be attacked by anyone. Ravina Alvi Ravi. Here's a story. Ravina did it for Rava Bar Yitzchak. Arba amot ba'ir. Mata liyadei hazeka. Something was about to befall him. V'itzil, and he was saved. So again, the rewards of this mitzvah. Tanu Rabbanit. What are the halachas of this? Harav litalmid adi b'washal ir. A Rav to his student, a Rav has to escort a student even though you would think, right? No, to the ibor of the city. That means to the outside, the outskirts of the city. This is like from ibor, pregnant, like the way it juts out a little bit outside the city. We learned all these terms in arufim. Chaver lechaver, friend to friend, ad chum Shabbat, 2,000 cubits outside the city. Talmid lechav, ein lo shiur. When your Rav visits you, you have to go, right, very far. Even though it says ein lo shiur, they say v'kama. Well, what is the shiur? There has to be some sort of a measurement. Amarav sheshet ad parsa. So a parasang. But that's not your own special rabbi. If it's your rabbi, you learn everything from. About Rabbo Mupak, shlosha parsa. It has to be 3. Rav Kahana Elviel Rav Shimi Bar Ashimi Pum Nahara Beit Simyata de Bavel. Rav Kahana took Rav Shimi to Pum Nahara, which was where from there till this place where there were a lot of dates in Bavel. Kimatu Hata Marmale, when they got there, he said to him, Vadai Amari to Hana Tzidyata de Bavel and Mishnei Adam Rishon. So they say these dates are from the time of Adam Rishon. Amarle Ed Kramilta. So the other one says to him, oh, you reminded me of something. It's a redundant pasuk in a land where nobody went past, right? Nobody passed there, and no inhabitants there. Well, if nobody passed there, obviously there's no inhabitants. So how could they have lived there? I don't know how to understand this, but they say if Adam Rishon said people are going to live there and thought about the place, it will be an inhabited place. So you can then connect it to Adam Rishon, even though he obviously didn't live there. But if it was a place that Adam Rishon thought about, lo yashav Adam sham, that means Adam didn't think about it. And that's why it's not a land that's going to be settled, inhabited. Again, what you make of this is a good question. But Mordechai Elviel Rav Ashi Mehagron Yavad Bekipe, another story of someone who took someone from somewhere to somewhere, escorted them. Amrila Beidura. Okay, we don't know these places, so it's hard to know what to do with this. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Meir. Kol she'eino malaveh u'mitlaveh ki'ilu shofech tamim. Shumalei livu anshei Yericho Elisha lo gira dubim letinoko. Now we get to a famous story of Elisha and these children. Elisha fixed the water in the city, and then these children come out of the city of Jericho and they start cursing him, and they say, Ale kerech, you baldy, go up. And then two bears come out and kill them. So now we're going to understand the story. The first thing they say is, if Anshei Yericho had taken him, when the kids would have started saying these things, the people of the city would have dealt with them and nothing would have happened. So because of that, these kids die. Shneimar, Vayal Misham Beit El V'hu Ole Baderech V'Narim Ktanim Yotzim Min Ha'ir V'Yitkassu Bo V'Yamru Lo Ale Kerech. So as he's going to Beit El, they start cursing him. Amrula Ale Sheikach Ta'alenu Et HaMakom. Why are they cursing him? Because they were the ones who were bringing water to the city when there was no water. This is like we say, technology is a bad thing sometimes because it ruins people's livelihood. They say, now you fix the water for them, but now we have no jobs. And he krachta, like you made it bold for us, like we have no jobs. My na'arim tanim, why are they called na'arim tanim? Na'arim are like young people, young, and they were really young. Amar Rabbi Elazar, sheminu arim min hamitzvot. Okay, they were Linaer, they didn't have mitzvot on them. Tanim shayum katnei amana. They didn't believe in God. They didn't believe that God would help them get a job, right? Get some other work. Tana na'arim ayu bizbizu atzmam tanim. They were really na'arim, but they acted like tanim. They were fully grown, but they were, immature. Matkefla Rav Yosef. B'dom al shem mekomam milokti va'aram yatzu b'judim ve'yishmu me'eretz Israel na'arak tana. There's another pasuk that says na'arak tana. What do they say? Kashelan na'arak tana. Am Rabbi Patat tana demini oran. Maybe it's from the Olam, which actually is near Yericho. But hatam lo mefarish mekomeh, hacham mefarish mekoman. Here it says they came from Jericho. So the assumption is they really were from Jericho and not from Neurah. So now the question is, and we'll end with this. Mara'a amarav ra'a mamash. It says he saw them and he cursed them. So the first opinion, Rav says, he saw them, meaning he looked at them and killed them with his eyes. We've seen this all over the Talmud. When the rabbis look, it's either death or they cause poverty, right? That's like the look of death. He saw that these kids actually, their mothers had gotten pregnant with them in Yom Kippur, where it's forbidden. And because of that, they were bad to begin with, okay, even though it's really not their fault, which is a little unfair. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafchamar, he saw their haircut was like the Emorim, which is the non-Jews, which is interesting because they're making fun of his lack of hair, and he's saying their hair was a problem. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, they had nothing of a mitzvah upon them, that they were really bad. But maybe their children will have mitzvot. So why are you killing them for that reason? He saw by prophecy that all the future generations weren't going to, and that's why they died. So this is an interesting, we're jarshing the story to try to figure out what exactly happened. We will end here, very long daf, and my last thought, they're very long. We will stop here. Have a great day, everybody.